Hello everyone, today our group is going to analyze the film The Farewell. Before starting with the theories, let me give you a short introduction to the movie. So The Farewell is a 2019 film directed by Lulu Wang. It tells the story of Billy, a young Chinese American woman who travels back to China when she learns that her grandmother, Nai Nai, has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. However, the family decides not to tell Nai Nai the truth about her illness, and instead they plan a fake wedding as an excuse for everyone to gather one last time. The film is not just about family bonds, but also about cultural differences, especially the contrast between Western and Eastern values. Through Billy's experience, we see how two worlds collide. Her American upbringing based on the individualism and direct communication, and her family's Chinese values of collectivism and acceptance of uncertainty. Now Carlos, Irene, Erika, and Christian will continue with the analysis of the film.
One of the most striking things about The Farewell is how well it portrays the difference between Western individualism and Chinese collectivism. The whole movie revolves around the clash of this cultural difference. In the film, the family decides not to tell Nene that she has cancer, and for someone raised in an American context like Billy, this idea feels weird and unthinkable. We usually assume that every person has the right to know their own diagnosis and make their choices about the way they want to live the rest of their lives. That's individualism, prioritizing the rights and autonomy of an individual. However, the family here acts differently. They believe that it's their duty to carry this emotional weight for Nene so that she can live the rest of her life happily and without fear. As Billy's uncle explains, in China, a person's life is part of a larger puzzle. And to tell Nene that she has cancer would put the weight of this puzzle on her shoulders alone, and that would go against their values, their collectivist values. So Billy, who has absorbed American individualism, struggles with this. She feels guilty about the lie at first, but then she starts to see the love inside this collectivist approach. It's not deception for the sake of control, it's deception for the sake of protection. So the film doesn't just tell a family story, it shows us how deeply cultural values can shape the choices we make, even when it's about life and death.
Another cultural dimension that is present in this film is uncertainty avoidance. According to the official culture comparison tool we've been using in class, China actually has a score of 30 on the uncertainty avoidance index, which means that Chinese people are generally pretty comfortable with ambiguity. However, as we know, no society is completely monolith, which means that sometimes there will be people who will behave a little differently from the rest, and thus they will also score differently. We can mostly see acceptance of uncertainty through the character of Little Nai Nai. Little Nai Nai is Billy's great aunt and Nai Nai's younger sister. And she is very well aware of Nai Nai's condition. She knows that she could either die really soon or live for many, many years to go. And she is ready to accept either outcome. She's prepared to either take care of her for as long as she's alive or retire with her husband and travel around the world in case that Nai Nai dies. On the surface, the rest of the family also seems to embrace that attitude of accepting Nai Nai's death with peace. But deep down, they are also very afraid. They are very afraid of not knowing when exactly Nai Nai is going to die. They are also very afraid of the fact that they can do very little to help her. And they are especially afraid of what could happen if Nai were to realize just how serious her condition is, which is the main reason why they didn't want Billy to come to the wedding in the first place. One specific quote that I think is very important for this analysis is said by Billy's mother, Jen, and it goes, when people get cancer, they die. It is not the cancer that kills them, it's the fear. I think this quote is particularly important because it shows that what the family truly fears is not the cancer in itself, but rather the uncertainty that comes with it, showing that even though the normal attitude in China would be to accept uncertainty easily, that is not always the case, especially when it concerns someone's life and death.
We are now going to talk about Edward Hall's definition of high and low context communication. In the movie The Farewell, it is clear how China represents a high context culture, while the United States represents a low context culture. At the start, when Billy's parents mention the wedding, they don't explain the real situation. They expect her to understand through context and accept what they say. They do not communicate the real feelings, that they are upset about something, but they expect Billy to understand that something else is going on, but she shouldn't be asking. But Billy, raised in the United States, represents low context communication because she wants everything to be said openly and directly and believes that telling the truth to her grandmother is the most responsible thing to do. This difference appears again when her parents tell her that she cannot hide her emotions. In the movie in China, silence, gestures, and body language communicate more than actual words, while in the United States, emotions are expressed directly. You can see this because Billy expressed her real emotions and feelings every time she has a chance. So, in a low context culture, they expect you to communicate a message through actual words and no meaning behind. We also see this contrast at family dinners where long pauses and nonverbal communication reveal more than what's said. If you don't understand the context, you would not understand why they do those faces or those gestures or why they have a lot of long pauses. Overall, the movie highlights how the United States depends on explicit, clear communication, while China relies on context, nonverbal cues, and shared understanding and shared values and norms.
Now let's talk about culture shock and cultural adaptation in the movie The Farewell. Even though this process is not the main focus of the movie, it is still one of the many aspects of living abroad that the protagonist has to cope with during the story. Of course, when talking about culture shock, it is important to remember that it is a process that people go through when they find themselves in an unfamiliar culture. This process can be divided into four stages, so let's see how each of these stages are portrayed in the film. The first stage, called the honeymoon stage, is barely shown in the movie. This makes sense because Billy isn't visiting China as a tourist, she's visiting because her grandma is ill, so it makes sense for her not to feel that positivity and curiosity that people often feel when encountering a new culture. She pretty much begins the process in the next stage, the hostility stage, during which, as its name implies, the outsider has feelings of frustration and irritation about the new culture they find themselves in. This can be seen in the way Billy focuses on the negatives of being in China, such as the man bringing women into the hotel her and her family are staying in, and the receptionist who just keeps bothering her. Moreover, she doesn't understand why her family does not want to tell her grandma that she is dying, and sees it as cruel. Next is the adjustment stage. This happens when the outsider begins to understand that every culture has its pros and cons. This is shown when Billy begins to participate more in her family's activities, such as working out with Nai and visiting her grandpa's grave and participating in that whole ritual, she comes to the conclusion that she might as well spend as much time with her grandma. Last but not least, there is the adaptation stage. Billy pretty much decides to agree with the rest of her family and hush about Nai-Nai's illness and goes along with the fake wedding they've been planning. She even goes out of her way to go and collect her grandma's diagnostic papers so that they can erase any mention of the illness. And thus, she finally achieves cultural adaptation.
In conclusion, the farewell illustrates how different intercultural communication concepts appear in one single family situation. Carlos showed us firstly how the film highlights the cultural dimension of individualism versus collectivism. Billy struggles with the idea of hiding the truth, but her family believes that protecting Nai-Nai is more important than individual rights. Next, Irene explained the uncertainty avoidance, showing how the family reacts differently to the unknown future. Next, Erika discussed high and low context communication. She showed how Billy, raised in low context American culture, needs direct communication, while her family in China relies on silence, gesture, and shared understanding. Finally, Christian talked about culture shock and adaptation. He explained how Billy first feels frustration and confusion in China, but eventually adapts and accepts her family's way of handling the situation. So together, this perspective shows how intercultural communication helps us understanding the conflicts and the solutions in the farewell.